basically the presentation is about the Rotary Community Corps. It's a joint effort between the two clubs, and that's worked out extremely well. And if you can say, well, what was the point really? The point was that the Sturbridge Rotary Club had a pretty good, still has a pretty good relationship with the St. John Paul II Food Pantry in Southbridge, which I'll show you a little bit more about it further into the presentation. But basically, it serves people who are hungry both in Sturbridge and Southbridge. So it was the natural place for us to go and link. So let me just go on to, okay, so why is this not, here we go. So here are the points I want to make. What really happened is that we have a local business, a landscape architect business that's owned by Joe Cohen. And he came to our club in, I guess, early 2017 and said he would like to really start a community garden in Sturbridge. And we looked blank and I said, you know what, this sounds to me like something that our Rotarians are really not going to, they're not going to be the workers on the whole. It really needs to be something that the community really gets involved in. And the Rotary Community Corps concept came to my mind. I knew that there were just a few of them, very few of them in our district. And I looked into that and it seemed to me that that's a way to go. So we said, okay, let's just see where this takes us. And we said, well, where, for example, would you go and set up a community garden in the area, both either in Southbridge or in Sturbridge? And we basically picked out 5 sites that had potential. Some were owned by the town, others by private individuals. And we ended up settling for one that has been super successful. And that's actually owned by the Federated Church of Sturbridge and Fiskdale. And the church itself is located right alongside Sturbridge Town Hall, which, as you will see, is significant here. So we said, okay, what were the advantages of getting involved with the church? Well, it turned out that this church had already run their own garden for the parishioners of the church. I think it ran for like about 3 years or so. And then basically the effort fell away. And the garden just went fallow. I mean, it just ended up being a bunch of weeds and stuff. And nobody was doing anything with it. But it had a garden shed, it had fences around it. It was actually an electrified fence. And it had wooden raised beds. So we said, well, you know, something to start with. And it also had very easy parking. So it's one of those things, while in theory it's hidden from view, it's very easily accessible. And you'll see that in a few minutes. It had a major disadvantage. There's no water. And you know, how do you grow anything without water? And the answer, the way that the church had done it, they literally ran a hose from the church across the roads, down the length of the road, for, I would say, about 400 feet. And I guess that worked after a fashion. But I mean, that really was, let's just turn it off, Glennie, can you? Yeah. Anyway, bottom line really was that wasn't a way to really do anything. So really the first things we did was said, okay, well, how do we set up, how do we get going? And we set up an exploratory committee, 3 Rotarians from Sturbridge and another 3 from Southbridge. And we've got a couple of gardening enthusiasts. So about 8 of us who started the thing said, okay, what's the task? So define the purpose. And it was very clear right early on that Joe Cohen, who is essentially the president of the organization, that the task was to grow organic produce. He was adamant this was going to be, and we were also adamant that whatever harvest we have, 100% of it was going to go to the local food bank. And I won't go into all the reasons why, but it made eminently good sense, and it avoided an awful lot of issues of, oh, you know, I should take this percentage and all that kind of stuff. All of that goes away when you go and say all of it goes to the food bank. We were familiar with the St. John Paul II Food Pantry. They have, I think they've been going since 1991, but they basically have almost like a supermarket in the basement of a church, and it's set up that way. But it's all long shelf life items. So we're looking at dry items, you're looking at canned goods, but nothing fresh. So when we approached them about, how about fresh produce directly from the garden, they were quite enthusiastic, and none of us knew really how to quite deal with it, but progressively we worked it out. The other issue is that the property itself is still owned by the church. And so obviously we had to get approval from the church to go and use their land, which indeed the church has been very generous and been supportive of us continuing to do this. We're now in year 4, just starting year 4, and so I think that speaks volumes. The other thing is, how do we get water there? And you'll see that that became a fun item. Because what I found is that when we walked around the outside of the town hall, wouldn't you know it, there's a garden hose spigot out there. And I said, tongue in cheek, why don't we go and ask the town selectmen whether they would approve us taking water from that garden hose spigot, run it all the way down to the garden and use it to water the garden. And I've got to be honest, much to my surprise, they totally approved of that. So to this day, all of the water is in fact coming from the town hall. And that's very nice because the town pays for the water. So we said, this is beginning to look like a go. So we in fact started and set up the Rotary Community Corps of Sturbridge and Southbridge with the intent that, at least initially, the only project that they would be working on would be what became, the project name became known as the Community Food Collaborative. And the intent being that it wouldn't just be Rotarians working there, but that anybody in the community could come and volunteer. So we put in the application for it, and indeed on the 16th of October 2017, we got what they call a certificate of organization, which is really rather like a club charter. It turns out the Rotary Community Corps doesn't have to adhere to quite such rigid rules as a Rotary Club does, but basically Rotary relies on the 2 clubs, Sturbridge and Southbridge clubs, to oversee the operation and make sure that it's kosher. Then we set about communicating, and we set up a garden website, a Facebook site. The Facebook site's really very, very good. In time, Joe puts out what's called the Dirt monthly newsletter, which is actually very good. So that's been going for quite a long time now. Now we said, okay, so who's going to do the work? And we had an open house in the basement of the church hall. And we invited people to come and listen to a presentation of what we were doing and to have them sign up. And we got them to go and sign the waivers so that they recognized it was, the risk was theirs of coming and working there. Once we'd got that done, Joe Cohen, who we now refer to as the head cabbage, he organized a committee of about 10 of us. He, by virtue of his business as a landscape architect, he has an awful lot of connections for people who can bring in bulldozers and all kinds of heavy machinery. And that's turned out to be incredibly useful. So one of the first things that he did is he went and put in a permanent water line from the town hall through the woods down to where the garden is. And we still have to connect it to the outside spigot, but you'll see as I show you the pictures how we worked our way through all that lot. Initially, the clubs both agreed we would go and put $3,000 into the Rotary Community Corps each. And that kicked us off very nicely. What we found in practice is that, if I think about roughly how much money have we spent on that garden so far, I bet you it's like $25,000. So the question is, where does the money come from? And the answer is, well, we went begging, and I'll show you who we went to as we go along. We went to businesses, we went to banks, We went begging to companies. That really brought us the bulk of the money. We've had in the 3 years that has been a fully operational garden, we've had 2 Rotary District grants. Last year we deliberately didn't apply because we felt that we were really sufficiently self-funding that we really didn't need to go there. So right now, you know, we're really doing quite well. So then we really start to do some real work, and it happened very early on. We had, well, I certainly had the hope that the senior high schools, both in the regional, Sturbridge regional system, as well as the Southbridge high school system, that we would get kids coming in and helping. And the reality is that we have no high school students from Southbridge, but we have a lot from Sturbridge. And that's been an absolute joy. I mean, basically, the regional school system that's centered on Sturbridge, it covers 5 towns. The high school, or the senior high school anyway, is also has a vocational component that they call the tech division of the Tantascwa Regional High School. And what we found is that they have been unbelievably helpful. So for example, the carpentry students, they went and installed the first raised beds, and you'll see that in a moment. We had the high school girls lacrosse team work their tails off to actually do a lot of lifting of loam and stuff. I mean, it was amazing to see. We got the culinary arts students supply food in open houses, and they're getting more and more involved now. We had the carpentry students build us a new garden shed, and it goes on and on, to the point where we had to really think, you know, we really need to be careful that we really thank all the volunteers for their efforts. So I deliberately put that note in there because the question is, how do you do that, and what did we actually do? Last year we fitted a new solar-powered control panel and pump system that feeds a drip feed irrigation system with 1,000 gallons of water storage. So basically we plug the hose into the town hall spigot and we run 1,000 gallons into the tanks, and then we allow the drip feed system to do the watering for us. And that's primarily because our volunteers were standing there for hours, multiple times a week, basically initially watering 20 raised beds and now doing 40. So, you know, it gets to a point where you just can't do it. We had a new fence put around, and again, you'll see what this whole thing looks like in a moment. Throughout, we really had amazingly good newspaper coverage. I mean, all the stuff that's going on there goes into 6 local papers, and they really do go and publish it. So we had a lot of visibility, still have a lot of visibility by virtue of the garden. But you know what? We haven't gotten one Rotary Club member out of that, and maybe it's not surprising. We're really looking at a different group of people. But in the process, we really ended up building a very close relationship, much closer with the food pantry. We've been giving them typically $3,000 a year. Last year we gave them $6,000, so that's the Sturbridge Rotary Club. But what we found is that linkages start to happen. So while we were also working separately with the Burgess Elementary School in Sturbridge, helping feed families that were clearly in need, and that's a whole long separate story I won't go into now. But basically what I'm trying to say is that the garden has proven to be a catalyst for creating a number of additional linkages to the senior center, to, you know, basically this thing is, the impact of the garden goes beyond just the garden, is what I'm really trying to say. And all of it's turned out to be very nice. So if you say, okay, well, what did you achieve? Well, year 1, so the first full year, year 2018, we, on 20 beds, we shipped 1,500, or just over 1,500 pounds of organic, cleaned produce. This stuff gets weighed by the by the food pantry, so we're not allowed to cheat. They're going to tell us what we've shipped to them, how much of what, and so on. Year two, we doubled the size of the garden. So basically have 40 beds there, and obviously we were going to try to beat 3,000 pounds. Well, we did it, and we were very proud of that. Then year three, the immediate past calendar year, we didn't quite get there. We had the drought, which created problems. We had an insect infestation, and we also had a critter who got in. So we're still pretty proud of what we achieved there. The garden is rigidly organic. So one of the issues that you have is, well, how do you keep the bugs out? And we did that by a mixture of different flowers that are not attractive to insects. We planted herbs in there and basically tried to do it naturally with no chemicals. Of course, last year we already had COVID-19. So that really forced on us a much clearer concept of how we organize people working in the garden. Basically what we do is the garden is locked, but 4 days a week it's open somewhere between 1.5 to 2 hours, depending on what's actually happening at the time. And we can get into that later. Interesting spin-off that's come out of that, and that is that Carl Gomes, who used to be in the Worcester Rotary Club, he lives in Worcester in the Indian Lake area region. And he is working very hard for more than a year now to go and create a community garden as part of a bigger activity. And he's tying the high school in with that and making it even part of a literacy project. So they're working very closely with the high school there. They're also working very closely with the town management, Worcester town management. And that's going to be a really interesting thing to go and watch. I hope you're all able to see these slides. Are you all okay with this?
Muted.
Okay. So basically the St. John Paul II Food Pantry is located in Southbridge. It's a church affiliated there, and it serves, basically, they tell us they serve 400 families and an additional 150 seniors. And I know that that's gone up in the last year. They on their books, they have about 70 volunteers. And they tell us that in terms of what they've been shipping traditionally, about 70 tons of food a year. So this has been going since 1991, well established, very, very well run, really quite impressive. Okay, so where are we now in terms of the garden? Where is it? This is Google Earth view, and what you're looking at is right at the center of Sturbridge. Bottom right hand is where the Sturbridge Common is, so we're just about catching the edge of that. The Federated Church indicated here, they own the garden. The town hall is just the other side of the street there, and when you look at it, you see how easy the access is. You simply drive around through the parking lot at the back there, and right over there is the entrance of to the garden. And it's about 1/3 of an acre. Now the shot that you see here shows that at that point in time, this was before we got hold of the property, but that was clearly the church's garden activity. We've made it bigger than that now. It's more or less the size that I'm indicating within the red dotted area. Yeah, here's just the Rotary Community Corps, so, basically our charter. So what happened? Well, we started in 2017 when Joe Cohen came to the club, and then we started to say, okay, what do we have to deal with? Here's what we had to deal with. So you're looking from the parking lot here, this little thing here going to the bird box there, this is the path into the garden. This is what the garden looked like. That's the shed that was on there, and more of the garden. Well, that was taken around about September, October time. This is what it looked like by December of 2017. So we got into 2018 and we said, okay, what's the task? we came to the conclusion really that the raised beds which the church had put there, the wood was rotting, that all needed to come out. The loam inside was certainly not organic, and we were determined to go and stay totally rigidly organic. So we stripped all of that out. And this was the first real effort to do something there. And what's happening here is at this point in time, new frames have been built by the students at Tantasco Regional High School carpentry group there. And this is in fact the group of lacrosse, ladies lacrosse team from the high school. And they're starting to fill the organic loam. And you see the piles of it there. So this was some pretty heavy lifting, and they were really impressive. We had 10 wheelbarrows going at a time, and this is what they were doing. So here we're looking at that point, 21 new raised beds. We were filling them with initially just regular loam, and then putting like 3 inches of organic loam over the top of that. And here's the team. And needless to say, the good-looking girls brought along some of their guys, didn't they? So they were working too. So it wasn't entirely a ladies' effort, but they were just a joy to work with. And the next thing that happens, guess what? Stuff grew. And so this was really some of the harvest, the first of our efforts, and so that came out of 2018. And like I say, we shipped, cleaned about 1,500 pounds of produce. So we said, okay, the end of 2018, yes, 2018, we said, what do we do now? And what we found was that our ideas of how you go and assign the workloads didn't really work. You know, we had 21 raised beds. We'd assigned individual beds to families, to Girl Scouts, to the Southbridge Garden Club, to different families. And what was really wrong with it was that it took people longer to get to the garden from home and go back again than it took to actually do what they needed to do on their individual bed. So we said, we're going to change the style of this. We're going up to 40 beds total. And what we did is we said, we'll divide it into 4 quarters of 10 beds in each quarter. And we will allow anybody who's willing to go and work. I mean, they have to sign the waiver and that and tell us they're coming. But whoever comes on a Monday, we'll do quarter A, on Wednesday, quarter B, Friday, quarter C, Sunday, quarter D. And you get to work on 10 raised beds. And that really makes the whole effort of going there makes much more sense. So what happened? Well, we really got moving. And, you know, if you say, well, what did we learn from any of this at that point in time? And the first thing was that the community support that we got was phenomenal. I mean, way more than we imagined. I mean, we had about 100 volunteers sign up. The reality is we didn't get them all to come, but we have them and we have the signed waivers, so they're free to come as and how they want. The other is that we were really surprised how generous the donors were, and that indeed people were eager to actually come and help. The concept of feeding the hungry is one that is such a strong motivational thing that people want to be part of it. So if you say, okay, what's the layout? We have about 6,000 square feet. That's, if you like, under cultivation. What we're seeing here in the lighter shade of brown was the original 21 beds. Then we went and added to that this region on the right here and the region at the back here. The idea being that this area down here would be, for example, for gourds, watermelons and stuff that really don't need to be put into a raised bed. And you'll see why in a moment. So we said too, Joe went and got some of his buddies, and they brought in some heavy machinery because we had to move some pretty big boulders. We had to take trees down, and what you're really seeing here in the picture, top right-hand corner, is the old fence there with its electrified wire along there. But here what they're doing is working around the outside and around the back of it and creating the new garden. So the way it works now is that Mondays basically from 5 to 6:30, Wednesdays same time, Fridays same time, and then Sunday morning. These are the times when the garden is open and people are, we're happy to have people come and work. We created this rather nice sign that's parked outside the garden, so to tell the world that this isn't just, well, really it's not to tell the world that the Community Food Collaborative is not an organization, that's the project. The organization is the Rotary Community Corps. And here's how it looked as we brought the second set of frames in. You see on the right the older frames, these are the new frames, there's the old garden shed. And we got the students, the carpentry students, to build us a new shed. So we paid for the wood and they did all the work. And it worked out pretty nicely. So we then had to haul the thing up into the garden, and it's there and looks really good right now. In terms of what we grow, the vegetable list: cucumbers, eggplants, beans, peppers, squash, tomatoes, watermelons, winter squash, zucchini. We grow a number of herbs, which apparently goes down very well at the food pantry. And then we're going to put a variety of different plants in there, flowers in there, to basically keep the bugs at bay. And mostly that's worked. This was the tally of how many pounds of what we delivered to the food pantry in 2019. And of course, we're very proud of the final bottom line number. So we got to season 3 and we said, okay, do we grow the garden again? And we said, no, we will not increase its size. We'll not put more beds in because it's all that we can actually manage. So the question is, well, can we repeat last year? And in the event, we didn't quite make it. Bugs did get in. We had a groundhog come in. We had the drought, of course, in the summertime. So there was a lot of watering going on. But we still managed to get 2,600 pounds delivered. And I think that's something to be pretty proud of. So this was really how the garden looked. We cleared all the front of it away, you see there on the left-hand side, the storage tanks there. It's 1,000 gallons of water there. There on the roof of the old shed, there's a solar panel there that powers the pump system, charges the battery, and there runs the timer for when we can draw water from the town hall and when it has to be pumped out. We've got a new fence there. It costs us $7,000 to put a new fence around this. It goes below ground level. This fence goes about 8 inches below, just to stop critters that like to dig down and get under the fence. They're going to meet a surprise trying to do that. And of course, COVID came along. And, we had been meeting, the committee had been meeting. We have a committee of about 12 of us. And we do meet on a monthly basis. And we are really very well organized. So come when the weather's good, well, guess what? We meet in the garden. And it works. So the outcome of that is, I think this looks pretty darn good. It's really exciting to watch. I mean, I'm 6'2" tall, and when you find that the tomato plant is taller than you are, you've got something going here. We also had to recognize that we need to be systematic about how we raised funds. And we created a system where a donor that gave $1,500 or above would go into the big boy tomato category. We'd have a watermelon category for anybody who gave $1,000 to $1,500, and so on and so forth. We published this and we put it onto a glass-fronted display cabinet that's on the old shed, so that anybody who comes and looks can see who's been donating, and they also see who are the in-kind donors. And it's amazing just how many people have really given their time and effort, brought the machinery in and so on. mostly at no cost to the effort. And I think that again speaks loudly for just the intense feelings that people have to try to stop people being hungry. We were very lucky. We worked very hard this immediate past year to be successful with a matching grant from the last Green Valley. And this was a $7,000 matching grant. And we did manage to raise the money, and we did get the grant. So there's some recognition there directly in the garden. Well, this is when the tanks were going in. They're not small, you know. What's interesting about this is one of the things we realized was that it's really very hard to go and stand there and water for hours at a time. I mean, there are 2 water spigots that we had the first 2 years there, and everything was watered by hose from those. But by the time you got 40 of these beds to water, and particularly if you have a drought, there's a major issue there. So part of this irrigation system is that the solar powered system goes and pumps water underground to each of the beds and then brings it up over the top of the beds. And if you look closely, you'll see that the hose that goes around inside the bed has little spurs that come off that you can lay directly where the plants are growing. So the point being that you don't just willy-nilly go and spray water everywhere, but you put the water where it's really needed. And here you can see it. You can see where the, where the water pipes come up here, go around in each of the beds, and here we've just got newspapers to try to keep the ground moist. But this was this immediate past year, 2020. And, stuff grows and it grows. Then we said, well, okay, how do you say thank you to people? And one of the things we've done each year is we've had an open house. And this particular one, we took advantage of the, by this time, really good connection we have with the regional high school. They have a culinary arts department there, which has its own cafe. So the school has, for the students, its cafeteria, but this is in fact an open to the public restaurant, which the culinary arts students run. So we made use of that facility there, invited people to come and hear a presentation by Joe Cohen. He's the guy on the left-hand side there. And subsequently had the culinary arts students also supply food. And I've got to tell you, it was pretty darn good. So the connection that we have with the school, the carpentry department, the culinary arts, the arts department, as you'll see, is really terrific. There's another thing that happens in Sturbridge, and I mean, this is very close to the garden. It's like a quarter of a mile from the garden. Right here on Sturbridge Common is the public house. And for decades, they've been running a scarecrow contest at Sturbridge Harvest Fest time. It's a 2-day event. It's a competition in 4 different class levels. And I've been trying to get our Sturbridge Rotary Club to create a Rotary scarecrow to compete in the competition, and no, we never got it off the ground. So we went to the high school and said, you know what? How about you guys doing something that would recognize the garden? And this is what the arts students created there. And they didn't get a prize for it, but I thought it was imaginative. And my boss here is telling me that she thought that they did. But anyway, so the arts teacher, Miss Sciolo, she brought her students along there. They created this, and it was really, basically directing attention to the garden. We did have a critter in there. We found that one day there were tomatoes lying on the ground that had all been nibbled, but not eaten. And he said, well, this is not where we want to go with this. And we had to bring in a pest control guy who gave his time, and he set a trap, and we got the critter pretty quickly, and he took him away. But, it's just a watch out. And he said, well, how's that possible given the brand new fence that we've got around there? The answer is we didn't pay enough attention. The critter very probably got directly under the gate because we hadn't raised the path high enough. So something else to bear in mind. This is something that these 2 high school students did on their own initiative. And they created this And we've now mounted it onto the old shed. We're going to be siding the old shed. It really needs it. But we thought that was really rather nice of them to go and do that. But besides that, it's all action. Here we are harvesting, and you get a sense of the size of some of these plants grow to. We get a mixture of people. I think, to say they love it, I think is an understatement. We really have a blast with this thing. Stuff grows big. We had a tomato that was 1.5 the size of a man's hand that weighed over 1 pound in weight this last year. We also get the adventurers that choose to either climb over the fence or go through the fence and work their way on down towards the post office. And it's just a bit of fun. And by way of a thank you, this is Joe Cohen. We gave the Sturbridge Rotary Club, gave him a Paul Harris Fellowship this immediate past year in recognition that he's really a dynamo. But we have a second dynamo, and that's the director of the food pantry. Roberta is just wonderful. I mean, that lady does an outstanding job at the food pantry. She's also now, starting with the year 2020, she is the head gardener now, and she knows a lot about gardening, and she's at least as energetic in the garden as she is in the food pantry. Just very deserving of a Paul Harris Fellowship. So the Sturbridge Club gave her a Paul Harris Fellowship last year as well. And coming to the end of the show here, that's what it's all about, folks. And that is my presentation.
Wow, good going, Klaus. That's super.
That's great.
Beautiful idea.
Yeah, it really works well. And if you're going to say, well, what's perhaps the most long-lasting impact? It's the way in which we've been able to penetrate the community, because some of these other things, where we're linking strongly, and we already had links with the elementary school as well, but it's gone way beyond that. Getting involved with the senior center, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Perhaps one of the most important findings is that I think I would not have had the courage to go to as many of the local businesses and to many of the banks to go begging for money. But to be honest, the members of the Southbridge Club, man, did they have connections. So they really contributed big time by way of their efforts to raise money from the businesses. And the banks really surprised me. I mean, there are 5 banks that are significant donors to this project, not just 1 year, but each of the years. So, we're learning a thing or two that if you have the right kind of a project that really hits at the heart of people in the community, then the businesses will come through for you. So, I think we are obviously proud and very happy where just at the status of the whole thing. Tomorrow evening will be our first committee meeting for the garden for this year. And, again, it'll be, okay, what are you going to grow? And what we do is we ask the food pantry, what do your customers want? And now after the first 3 years, we have a pretty good idea what the answer is. And so I think it's falling into place. But it's a joy. It's a joy. So anytime you're in the Sturbridge area, give me a call.